Assalamu alaikum. I hope you're doing well. That's me, Muhammad Al-Wishi, teaching you a new subject, cultural studies. Comes to you from London College of International Studies. The course outline will be about the first shocks, post-war, rebellion, 1950s to 1960s. Part two, nurture attitude confronting the mainstream, 1970s to 1980s. Part three, digital revolutions plus global fusions from 1990s to the present time. This slide outlined the structure of the course, dividing it into three chronological parts that trace the evolution of youth subcultures. Each part corresponds to a distinct era and theme. Post-war rebellion in the 1950s to 1960s, confrontal subcultures in the 1970s to 1980s, and digital global influences from the 1990s onward. The outline provides a roadmap for students, indicating a historical and thematic progression in studying youth subcultures. Uh, Youth subcultures reimagining identity, reshaping the world. Throughout history, young people have carved out spaces of resistance, creativity, and belonging through the formation of distinctive subcultures. These cultures movements do more than just shock parents and authority figures. They represent profound statements about society, identity, and the universal human need to find one's tribe. This exploration takes us through the evolution of youth subcultures from post-war rebellion to today's digital collectives, examining how we change uh, imagines what it means to resist, to belong, to create in your historical moment. So the slide introduces the concept of youth subcultures, emphasizing the significance beyond mere rebellion. It frames subcultures as cultural movements that reflect deeper societal and identity-driven purposes. The slide sets the stage for a comprehensive analysis, promising to explore not just something, but the deeper meaning of identity formation, radical resistance, and the cultural innovation across different historical moments. As we journey through these cultural movements, we will analyze not just their surface aesthetics, but their deeper significance as sites of identity formation, political resistance, and creative innovation. We will see how language, fashion, music, and ritual work together to create powerful systems of meaning that challenge, inspire, and ultimately transformation stream culture. So the slide builds on the previous one, delving into the analytical approach. Of course, it emphasizes that subcultures are not superficial but are complex systems that use various elements, language, fashion, music, rituals to cover meaning. These elements challenge mainstream norms, inspire change, and ultimately reshape brooding cultural landscapes, positioning subcultures um, as transformative focus and transformative forces. Before the 1950s, the concept of youth as we understand it today barely existed. Children effectively transition it directly into adulthood, often beginning work in their early teens and assuming adult responsibilities soon after. The period we now recognize as adolescence, which means المراهقة, was compressed with minimal cultural distinction between teenagers and adults. So we can say that before 1950s, a youth barely existed. Children transitioned directly to adulthood. Post-World War II, the economic boom created unprecedented conditions. So this slide establishes a universal truth that youth rebellion is inevitable, providing historical context. It notes that pre-1950s, adolescence was minimal. Children started work early and assumed adult roles quickly with little cultural distinction. The post-war second economic boom changed this by creating new conditions for youth autonomy. The slide's purpose to explain the origins modern youth culture as a product of historical shifts, setting up the discussion of 1950s subcultures. It uses this universal framing to emphasize that rebellion is a timeless response to societal changes, making the content relatable and foundational for understanding subsequent eras. Universal truth, youth will always rebel. However, the post-war World War II economic boom created unprecedented conditions that would forever change this trajectory. For the first time in history, young people had disposal income from part-time jobs, more leisure time due to labor laws and extended education, a collective desire to break from the traditions and traumas of their parents' generation, new technologies, transistor radios, affordable record players, allowing for private consumption of culture. Young people had disposable income from part-time jobs, more leisure time due to labor laws and extended education, collective desire to break from parents, traditions, traumas, new technologies, transistor radios, affordable record players for private culture consumption. Continuing from the previous slide, this details the specific post World War II factors enabling youth rebellion, economic prosperity, providing disposable income, legal, educational changes, granting leisure time, psychological break from wartime parental experiences, and technologies, allowing independent cultural access. The slide's purpose is to illustrate how these elements created a new demographic space for youth, leading to the birth of subcultures. It highlights the role of technology and economic in culture shifts, providing a socio-historical lens that connects to modern digital influences. This unprecedented coverage created a liminal space between childhood and adulthood, a demographic vacuum that young people quickly filled with their own cultural codes, rituals, and expressions. What emerged was nothing short of coverage and the convergence created a liminal space between childhood and adulthood, a demographic vacuum filled by youth with their own culture, codes, rituals, and expressions. What emerged was nothing short of a revolution or similar based on what you think. This slide concludes the universal truth section by describing how the post-World War factors created a liminal space, transitional phase between childhood and adulthood. Youth filled this demographic vacuum with self-created culture, elements like codes, symbols, rituals, practices, and expressions, styles, and music. The slide's purpose to dramatize the emergence of youth culture as a revolutionary development, emphasizing its novelty and impact. It transitions to part one by um, underscoring that this was the birth of modern subcultures as autonomous forces. Part one, the first shocks, post-war rebellion, 1950s to 1960s. So this slide marked the start of part one, titled the first shocks, post-war rebellion, 1950s to 1960s. It serves as a section divider, signaling the focus on the initial wave of youth subcultures post World War II. The first shocks refer to the surprising and disruptive nature of these movements in a conservative era. The purpose is to organize the content chronologically, preparing viewers for specific examples like Teddy Boy, modes, hobbies, and highlighting the theme of rebellion against post-war norms. Mm, The first shock, post-war rebellion, 1950s to 1960s, the post-war a period witnessed an unprecedented phenomenon, young people actively rejecting the cultural inheritance of their parents. The psychological impact of World War II created a generation um, chasm that manifested in dramatic new forms of expression. These first waves of youth rebellion shocked society precisely because they were unprecedented. There was no cultural framework for understanding teenager as autonomous cultural actors. So the post-war period saw youth rejecting parents' cultural inheritance. World War II psychological impact created a generation chasm, manifested in new expressions that shocked society as unprecedented. No framework for teenagers as autonomous cultures actors. So the slide um, liberates on part one theme, explaining how post-war youth rejected parental legacies due to World War II trauma, creating a generational chasm. These rebellions were shocking because they were new. Society um, lacked a way to understand teenagers as independent cultural creators. The purpose is to contextualize the era's subcultures as responses to historical traumas, emphasizing their novelty and societal impact. It sets up the discussion of how these movements established patterns for future subcultures. This period established the pattern that would define youth subcultures for decades to come. Distinctive fashion as visual identity, music as collective ritual, and moral panic as societal response. What makes these early subcultures particularly significant their uh, emergence in a media landscape that was becoming increasingly visual and immediate, allowing youth rebellion to be broadcast, commodified, and mythologized with unprecedented speed. Establish patterns, fashion as visual identity, music as collective ritual, moral panic as societal response, emergence in a visual, immediate media landscape allowed broadcasting, commodification, and mythologization. Continuing the part one introduction, this slide identified key patterns set by 1950s to 1960s subcultures, fashion for identity, music for rituals, and provoking moral panic. It notes the role of evolving media, TV, newspapers in amplifying these movements through quick dissemination, leading to commodification and the legendary status. The purpose is to highlight the era's legacy in defining subcultures, elements, and the media's role in their speed and their spread, bridging historical context to analytical themes. The first shocks, post-war rebellion, 1950s to 1960s timeline. So 1954, Rock Around the Clock released, igniting Teddy Boy movement. 1956, Teddy Boy riots in cinemas across the UK, and 1962, mod cultures emerged in London. The slide begins a timeline of key events in part one, starting with 1954, the release of Rock Around the Clock, which sparked the Teddy Boy movement through its rock and roll energy. 1956 saw riots in UK cinemas during film screenings, symbolizing youth unrest. 1962 marked the emergence of mod cultures in London, known for style and sophistication. The purpose is to provide chronological anchors, illustrating the progression of subcultures and their cultural milestones, helping students visualize the era's lifetime. and timeline. "1964 Battle of Brinkton between mods and rockers." 1967 Summer of Love marks happy cultural peak. 1969 Woodstock Festival draws 400,000 attendees. Continuing the timeline, this slide covers 1964's Battle of Brinkton, a famous clash between scooter riding stylists and rockers, motorcycle enthusiasts, symbolizing culture and subcultural rivalries. 1967's Summer of Love represented the high-beat peak, with peace and culture. 1969's Woodstock Festival attracted almost 400,000, optimizing center culture. The purpose is to complete the era's key events, showing escalation from local rebellions to massive gatherings and emphasizing subculture's growing scale and influence. The Little Boys. Edwardian elegance meets working class edge. The Teddy Boys emerged in working class London neighborhood during the early 1950s, representing Brighton's first distinctive post-war youth subculture. Their name derived from their adoption of Edwardian and inspired fashion. Teddy began short for Edward. What made this move revolutionary was its class inversion. Working class youth appropriatizing the sartorial codes of the British class and transforming them into something provocative and threatening. Origins and contexts emerged in working class London in early 1950s. First post-war youth sculpture, name from Edwardian inspired fashion. Teddy for Edward. Class inversion, working class youth appropriating aristocracy, sartorial codes and transforming them. The slide introduces the Teddy Boys as Britain's first distinct post-war subcultures originating the 1950s working class London neighborhoods. The name derives from Edwardian fashion, shortened to Teddy. It highlights class inversion, where lower class youth adopted and altered upper class styles to create something provocative. The purpose is to detail the subculture's socio-economic roots, showing how fashion became a tool for class commentary and rebellion, setting an example for future movements. Musical affiliation. The Teddy Boys embraced American rock and roll with fervor, particularly Bill Haley, Elvis Presley, and Eddie Kuchran. This music, with its driving rhythms, sexual undertones, and American accent, represented a complete break from British culture, traditions, and the artistry of post-war life. Cinema screenings of film like Rock Around the Clock became catalytic events, sometimes erupting into riots that shocked the British society. So, musical affiliation embraced American rock and roll, Bill Haley, Elvis Presley, Eddie Kuchran, music's rhythms, sexual undertones, and American accent broke from British traditions and the post-war uh, austerity. Cinema screening of film like Rock Around the Clock led to riots. This slide focuses on the Titties Boys musical preferences, adopting American rock and roll for its rebellious energy, contrasting with British post-war conservatism. Artists like Bill Haley and Elvis symbolized freedom from austerity. Film screenings became flashpoints for riots, highlighting the subculture's disruptive potential. Purpose is to illustrate how music served as a catalyst for cultural break, amplifying the subculture's impact through media and the public reactions. The Teddy Boys Edwardian elegance meets working class edge style. Distinctive look, long draped jackets with velvet collars and the cuffs, high-waisted drain pipe trousers. This slide described the titty boys' signature style, including long jackets with velvet details and narrow trousers, blending Edwardian elegance with working class edge, likely accompanied by an image it emphasizing fashion as resistance. The purpose is to visualize the subculture's aesthetic, showing how clothing choices symbolize the class defiance and created a unified identity influencing future subculture fashion. The mode, style, speed, and status. So, metropolitan modernists emerging in early 1960s London, the mods, short for modernists, represented a sharp contrast to the teddy boys before them, typically from lower middle class backgrounds with office jobs. Mods embraced continental sophistication and urban cool. They were obsessively forward-looking, rejecting nostalgia in favor of the sleek, thirdom, and the new. So they emerged in early 1960s London, contrast to TD boys from the lower middle class background with office jobs. Embrace the continental sophistication and the urban cool, obsessively forward-looking, rejecting nostalgia. So this slide introduces the modernists as 1960s London subculture opposing TD Boys' retro style from lower middle class. They pursued modern European-inspired sophistication, focusing on the new rather than the past. The purpose is to contrast with previous subcultures, highlighting mode's aspirational ethos and urban focus, illustrating generational shifts in rebellion. Fashion as religion. Modern style was characterized by meticulous attention to detail, slim cut Italian suits, button down shorts, Chelsea boots, and the military borks to protect their clothing while riding scooters. Female modes adopting looks with short haircuts, shift dresses, and heavy eye makeup. What united them was an almost fantastical commitment to appearing impeccable. Many spent entire paychecks on clothing and accessories. So we can summarize this by saying that fashion and religion, meticulous details, slim-cut Italian suits, button-down shirts, Chelsea boots, military parks to protect clothing on scooters, female moods, androgynous looks with short haircuts, shift dresses, heavy eye makeup, a fantastical commitment to unpredictability, spent paychecks on clothing. So the slide portrays mode fashion as a religion with precious elements like Italian suits and boots, parkas protected outfit during scooter rides, female styles were challenging gender norms, the obsession with perfection showed fashion as identity. The purpose is to detail the subculture's style-driven nature, emphasizing consumerism and sophistication as forms of resistance. Mobility status symbols. Italian scooters, Vespas, and Lambritis became the quintessential mode, transport, and status symbol, often customized with multiple mirrors and chrome accessories. These vehicles represented freedom, European sophistication, and rejection of British manufacturing. The scooter was not just transportation, but a crucial component of mod identity, mobile fashion statements that distinguished them from motorcycle riding rockers. So we can say mobility and status symbols, Italian scooter, Vespas, and Lambretta as a quintessential transport, customized with mirror and chrome, represented freedom, European sophistication, rejection of British manufacturing, scooter as mobile fashion statement, distinguished from motorcycle riding rockers. So the slide highlights scooters as mod status symbols customized for style. They symbolize freedom and European flair, contrasting British products and rockers' bikes. The purpose is to show how mobility reinforced identity, blending practice with symbolism and fueling rivalries like mod versus rockers. The Battle of Brington and the media spectacle. The infamous clashes between mod and rockers at Brington Beach during the Easter weekend of 1964 became a defining moment in British youth culture. The media coverage was sensationalized with headlines declaring Day of Terror by School Valid Seaside. This event demonstrated how subcultural identity could be amplified and distorted through media representation, creating moral panic while simultaneously cementing the mode's place in cultural history. So the Battle of Brighton as a media spectacle, 1964, Easter weekend clashes between mods and rockers. Media sensationalized headlines like Day of Terror by scooter groups, wild ones invade seasides. Amplified and distorted subcultures identity creating moral panic. So this slide recounts the 1964 Brighton clashes as a defining event, with media hype turning minor incidents into national scandals. It demonstrates media's role in shaping perceptions. The purpose is to explore how subcultures interact with media, leading to amplification, distortion, and the culture myth making. The model's legacy extends for far beyond their brave history, influencing British fashion, music, and young culture for decades. These can emphasize on style as substance and their aspiration ethos their aspirational ethos would be periodically revived, most notably in the mod revival of the late 1970s and again in the Britoperia of the 1990s. So Mo's legacy extends beyond heyday, influencing British fashion, music, youth culture, revived in the late 1970s mod revival and 1990s Brit Bop. This slide discussion about Mo's lasting impact on culture, with the revivals showing enduring appeal. Purpose is to conclude the mod section by emphasizing legacy, illustrating how subcultures influence long-term trends in fashion and music. The hype piece, peace, love, and psychedelic resistance content will be, while earlier youth subcultures primarily expressed resistance through style and music, the hippie movement of the late 1960s represented something far more ambitious, a wholesale rejected of mainstream American value and an attempt to construct alternative ways of living emerging from the convergence of the beat moment, anti-war criticism, and psychedelic drug experimentation. Hippies sought nothing less than cultural evolution. Rejection of mainstream American values, attempt to construct alternative ways of living, emerged from beat movements, anti-war activism, and the drug experimentation. The slide introduces hippies as a 1960s movement rejecting consumerism, seeking alternative lifestyles through beats, anti-war efforts, and the purpose is to contrast with previous subcultures, showing hippies' ambition for societal transformation rather than just style. So the hippies, peace, love, and the resistance ideological foundation, anti-materialism, rejection of consumer capitalism and career ambition, anti-war activism, opposition to the Vietnam War and the military industrial complex, sexual liberation, challenging traditional sexual morality and gender roles, Eastern spirituality, embracing meditation, yoga, and the non-Western religious traditions, communal living, creating alternative family structures and living arrangements, environmental consciousness, early advocacy for ecological awareness and sustainability. So we can summarize it that the ideological foundation was about anti-materialism, anti-war activism, sexual liberation, Eastern spirituality, communal living, environmental consciousness. The slide lists high-base core ideologies from rejecting capitalism to embracing ecology. The purpose is to detail the subcultures, philosophical depth, positioning it as a holistic uh, counterculture addressing multiple social issues. So the slide lists high-base core ideologies from rejecting capitalism to embracing ecology. Let's go back to the aesthetics of the hobbies. Psychedelic aesthetics, high-beat visual culture influenced by LSD experiences, embrace the vibrant colors, flowing organic forms, and Eastern-inspired motifs. This aesthetic permeated fashion, poster art, album covers, and communal spaces, unlike previous subcultures. Hype style explicitly ad, rejected consumerism, often incorporating handmade elements, natural materials, and repurposed items. So it was about vibrant colors, um, flowing forms, Eastern motifs influenced by LSD, permeated fashion art, album covers, rejected consumerism with handmade natural materials. So this slide describes Highway's visual style inspired by anti-consumerism. The purpose is to show how they reflected ideology using organic repurposed items to symbolize and reject of mainstream values. Part 2, anarchy attitude confronting the mainstream 1970s to 1980s. So the slide introduces part 2, focusing on 1970s to 1980s subcultures that confronted mainstream directly. The purpose is to transition to a new era, highlighting themes of anarchy and attitude amid socio-economic challenges. Anarchy attitude confronting the mainstream, the 1970s and the 1980s witnessed the emergence of subcultures that were explicitly confrontational, rejected the perceived commercialization. Earlier movements like hippie counterculture, the new mainstream, from 1970 to 1980, subcultures developed in response to specific socioeconomic conditions. Um, a realization or deindustrialization, urban decay, high youth unemployment, and the collapse of post-war consensus politics. These expressions were often raw, unfiltered critics of society that refused to offer utopian alternatives. Alternatives. So it was explicitly confrontational, rejecting commercialization of hobbies, response to deindustrialization, urban decay, unemployment, post-war consensus collapse. The slide explains the era's subcultures as reactions to economic crisis, revising utopian alternatives. The purpose is to contextualize the shift to raw critics, setting up punk, goth, and hip hop as oppositional forces. What distinguishes this eras, how these movements positions themselves in deliberate position to mainstream culture rather than merely as alternatives to it. They were designed to provoke, disturb, and challenge rather than seduce or inspire. In many ways, these subcultures represented a more sophisticated understanding of media mechanics. They were self-consciously performing their billion for an audience that included not just bear and the moral guardians. So, positioned in opposition to mainstream, they provoke and challenge more sophisticated understanding of media, performed rebellion for audiences, including journalists and the moral guardians. So, this slide notes the era's self-aware of media for provocation. The purpose is to highlight how subcultures evolved using media to amplify impact while blurring underground mainstream boundaries. So, in 1975, Malcolm opens Six Boutique, Punk is Ground Zero. 1977, Six Pistols release God Save the Queen during Jubilee. 1979, Pahos releases Bela Lugosi's Dead, Gothic rock anthem. 1980, Batcave Club open in London, centralizing Gothic. So the slide starts the timeline for part two with 1965's Six Boutiques and Punk's origin. 1977 song as anti-monarchy statement and the 1979's track as goth anthem. The purpose is to chronologically map key moments, showing progression from punk to goth. 1982, the message by Grandmaster Flash bring hip hop social commentary to mainstream. 1988, NWA releases Straight Outta Compton, defining gangsta rap. Continuing the lifetime, this covers 1980s Bat Cave for Goth, 1982 Song for Hip Hop commentary, the 1980s album for gangster rap. Purpose is to complete the era's milestones, illustrating the diversity and the social focus of subcultures. Origins in crisis. Punk's new future, no roles. Punk emerged in mid-1970s, Britain during a period of economic decline, high unemployment, and social unrest. The movement explicitly rejecting the perceived excesses and the commercialism of progressive rock and failed utopianism of high B era. In New York, a parallel scene developed at Venus like GBGB through with less explicit political content than its British counterpart. So, origins in crisis mid-1970s Britain during economic decline, unemployment, social unrest, rejected progress, rock excesses, and high B utopianism. Parallel scene in New York at CBGB. Slide details Bank's origins amid 1970s crisis, rejecting prayer movements. It mentions a New York scene for global context. The purpose is to root punk in socio-economic conditions, showing it as a reaction to perceived cultural failures. Last slide today. DIY ethos central to punk was with the idea that anyone could participate regardless of technical skill or for melting formal training. This democratizing impulse extended beyond music to fashion, publishing through photocopied vinyls and art. The slogan, here is 3 chords now for my band, or for my band, encapsulated this approach, which valued them and immediacy over virtuality. So the DIY ethos, anyone could participate regardless of skill, extended to fashion, publishing, zines, art. Slogan, here is 3 chords now for my band, valued authenticity over virtuality. The slide emphasizes punk's DIY philosophy, democratizing culture. The purpose is to highlight inclusivity and anti-elitism, contrasting with commercial music and showing punk's broader creative impact. Thank you so much for watching me in this video, and we'll continue next video with the next rest of this subject, inshallah. Thank you. Catch you later.